Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. I have a really great guest today. I've got Victoria Yates with me. Hi, Victoria.
Hey, Wendy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. Victoria is a registered nurse and a certified intuitive eating counselor and whole health coach, and she runs her own coaching practice. And we're going to talk today about body image and also intuitive eating. And body image is something that we've definitely touched on in so many other episodes, but we've never had a guest on to talk specifically about body image, what it is, how to know what your body image is, whether that's actually serving you, and how you can start working on changing it if it's not. So I'm excited to have this conversation. I feel like this topic is relevant to everyone, but I think it's particularly relevant to a lot of the women who listen to this podcast, Victoria, because so many of the women listening to this podcast are going through natural body changes right now as a result of the stage of life they're in, if nothing else, just the hormonal changes that are happening in perimenopause and menopause. And then on top of that, I think a lot of us are dealing with body changes as a result of coming out of 2 years of the weirdest time of our life during this pandemic and all of the, social isolation and stress and pressure that's come with that. And so it feels like the perfect time for me to be talking about this topic. So maybe we can get started. Do you want to just share with people a little bit more about you and your story and how you came to become, to be doing what you're doing now and be focused on helping women around their body image?
Sure. Yes. So as you mentioned, I'm a nurse. My background is nursing. I don't practice in the clinical sense anymore. I am solely a coach now and a mama. But I really got into this work because of my own struggles with food and body image for a good part of my life. And one thing that I realized in my own healing of my relationship with food and my body is that there's so much messaging out there that we can't trust our bodies, we can't trust ourselves. And it's leading us to look to everything outside of us, diets, to name one thing, but to just try to feel enough, to try to feel beautiful, to feel like we're doing a good job. I know that that's how it was for me. I looked to food and exercise and trying to control my body to feel like I was doing a good job at just life. And it led to just such an unhealthy place. And I see this time and time again, just with so many of the women I work with, and just like being out in the world and having conversations. It's like there's so much focus on trying to change our bodies and trying to just look for that next thing outside of us, to eat better, to try to find the answer, quote unquote. And all along, what I discovered was my body is so wise and smart. And when part of my own journey was when I discovered intuitive eating, it was like a light bulb went off for me, just having, I know that that's not the case for everyone, but for me, just with my background in health and, learning about how the body works, it made so much sense, because the way that I was approaching health in the past was, okay, I have to control everything. I have to watch what I'm eating, when the reality is our bodies are really smart and we can trust them, and it gives us cues around eating that we can rely on to feel our best. And when we do that, when we actually work with our bodies, we end up feeling so much better and healthier. And it's like, even more than just the physical sense, like there's so much physical benefit with working with our bodies versus dieting, which is basically fighting against our bodies, which maybe we'll talk about, but especially too in the mental area, so much, just feeling so much better in that area as well. So anyway, that's just led me into just having this passion to help other women to get to this place where they trust their bodies, they trust themselves, and live happier, healthier lives as a result.
Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll actually just start with, we have talked about intuitive eating a lot on this podcast. I've had my good friend and naturopathic doctor and intuitive eating coach, Jen Sleep-Huber, on here many times. She's also a registered dietitian. So we've talked about intuitive eating, but for anybody who's listening to this episode who hasn't heard those episodes, maybe you can just kind of summarize what it is we're talking about here when we're talking about intuitive eating.
Sure. So intuitive eating is just a framework to help you get away from the diet cycle, get away from dieting, and learn to eat normally and trust your body. So that is kind of what we're talking about when we say intuitive eating.
So let's start then with the body image piece of this, because that is, again, that I really do want to focus on that today, because I don't think we've talked about that in any major sort of directed way yet on this podcast. So I think we all know what we're talking about when we're talking about body image, but what are the factors that actually influence our body image? How do we go from that place? I was reflecting on this before I got on with you about when it was for me that my body image became even a focus. So when I actually became aware of my own body image, and it's actually really sad when I think back on it. I remember being as young as probably 11 and thinking that I probably had like bigger legs than the other girls in bathing suits, things like that. And of course, now I look back at pictures and I'm like, what the heck? But I think it started there, that probably even younger than that, but that's my earliest like recollection of being specifically critical of my own body. So we're talking about body image. Like, when does that start for most women? That inner dialogue, because that's really what it is. It's like a conversation with yourself about your body and what it looks like and what that means, I guess. Is that how you would define body image?
Yeah, I would say, body image really is just the thoughts that you have about your body.
Yeah.
Which it's like, notice that, I didn't say it's not the thoughts that other people have about your body. Right. It's not even anything to do with the physical. It's not anything to do with your body shape, your size, your hair color, your skin color. It's everything, just your thoughts about your own body.
Right. Your own image, your own image that is the collection of all those thoughts put together, of your own body. Right. Yeah. And so when does that start for most women? I mean, am I alone in that? I'm assuming I'm not.
Not at all. No, I would say for most women, it is around puberty or just before that women start to develop those thoughts about their body. And some people, some women, what I have found is it's sadly even getting earlier and earlier than that, just based on culture and marketing and messages that even younger women and younger kids, younger girls are getting from society. And so there's definitely a number of different factors that go into this, but for most women that I talk to, it starts around those puberty years when our body starts to go through that first major change. I know that was the fact for me too, is I noticed that my body was changing and looking different at a different rate than other people's. And so you start to see that difference. And it's like we have this message in our head that difference is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And so that's usually when those first thoughts start up.
Yeah. And then that obviously just continues to morph and change over the years after that. And more messaging comes in from the outside about what a body should look like. And that influences the thoughts that we have around our own body. And I think for a lot of us, that body image becomes very distorted and is really not true, but we all believe it to be incredibly true, which is why I wanted to talk to you about this, because I think this is one of those areas where, the things that we believe about, certainly for me, and this is something this has been a work in progress for me for many, many years, but and I do think my body image has shifted to a healthier place now, but there definitely was a period of time where it was not positive at all. but I also believed it to be as true as the sky is blue. So the things I was saying to myself felt very, very, very true to me, which is it's a hard place to make any progress from or any change from. When you believe something to be just so true, it's very, very difficult to shift your thoughts on that. So I was curious, as to how a person goes about working on changing their body image. So when you're working with a woman and she's obviously got a body image that is not serving her. So I guess even whether it's true or not is kind of irrelevant in terms of whether it's serving you or not, right? So let me just ask you that question. When you're working with someone who has a body image that isn't serving them, how do you coach them into changing that? Like, what are some of the steps that we can take to start changing that?
Yeah. Well, what you said a moment ago about how, you might have these thoughts about your body and they feel so true. And it's because whenever we think anything, our brain's going to look for the evidence that it is true. Mm-hmm. And it's like we have this feeling, like I feel some common negative emotions that women feel around their bodies are, maybe anger, shame, disgust. And so when you're feeling that way, if you're thinking certain thoughts that are leading you to feel that way about your body, you're going to look for all the evidence that it's true. You're going to start comparing yourself. You're going to just find that. And so part of the work that I do with body image and making those shifts it involves, okay, what are the thoughts that you are just on? What are the thoughts that are just on repeat right now that maybe you don't even recognize, but it's like this superhighway that the thoughts that you have that are just, you believe them to be as true as the sky is blue. Mm-hmm. What are those? And let's start to examine those thoughts. Let's start to challenge them. And, since we know that the way that your thinking isn't serving you, you see that's why we're doing this work together. Let's start to make just even a baby step shift. So right. For a lot of people, that's maybe not going to the place of, I want to feel happy and joy in my body, because maybe that doesn't even feel possible. Like having the thought, I love my body, might not feel super possible right now. And so let's maybe just move to something a little more neutral. Like let's work on getting to the place where you just feel content. And that, even just that shift from all of those negative emotions to, I just feel content in my body, we can see so much change, because the way that our body image works is it impacts every area of our lives. Like if you even just stop to think about it, and I've had clients experience this, of when they do this work on their body image, it's impacting their relationships, their marriage, how they show up in their job and their career, their role as a mom or as a wife or, whatnot. So we see that impact everywhere. And so starting to examine, okay, the way that I think right now is not actually how I want. It's not how I want to live my life. Part of making that first step is let's just get to the place where I'm just content. And maybe even that means practicing a thought like, all right, I have a body versus I hate my body. That can already, you can start to see the impact in all of those areas of your life, even just by practicing the thought, I have a body. Whenever you notice that hateful type thinking come up, redirecting your brain to, I have a body, and then trying to find some ways to move forward. It doesn't mean that, and I think this is a big thing to point out, is that having a positive body image, a lot of people associate that with meaning I feel happy and wonderful about my body all the time. And that just doesn't have to be the case all the time. I mean, we're human beings with human brains that just tend to kind of like go back to the negative. And it's more so, all right, when I have these negative thoughts, how can I still show up for my body in a way that's going to serve me? And I actually love, I did say a moment ago that we don't have to be at the place where we absolutely feel that lovey-dovey feeling about our body all the time. But the way that I think about loving our bodies is actually more like loving our spouse, where it's more of like a choice. Sometimes it's more of a choice. Sometimes it's that feeling, that warm, fuzzy feeling, but sometimes it's really just that choice. Like, I decided today that I'm going to love my body, even though I don't feel great in it. And that's going to impact how you show up for yourself. And you're going to show up more as the person you want to be versus being consumed by those negative thoughts.
Yeah, I love all of this. I think this is really in alignment with the way that I coach around alcohol, for example, this idea of the first step being getting really aware of your thoughts. And this is probably a great place for women to start. If you're listening to this podcast, start paying attention to what you're actually thinking about your body and how often you're having those thoughts. Write them down. Awareness is always really, really uncomfortable. It's probably not going to feel good when you look at that list at the end of the day and you realize, oh my gosh, I told myself 100 times today that my body wasn't good enough. But without that uncomfortable awareness, we can't make any change. So it's always this necessary precursor to actually making improvements and growing as a human being. So that awareness piece is the first piece, actually listening to what you're saying. What is the conversation I'm having with myself? Because I think a lot of women probably walk around and they're like, I don't have a terrible body image. I'm just a normal woman and my body is not and my body's not looking so great right now. So this isn't a body image issue. It's actually a body issue, right? I think that's what women do. I think we justify it. And this is where I was trying to go with the whole truth of it thing. I think we believe it is true. So it doesn't feel like an image issue. It feels like a factual issue, if that makes sense. And so I think the first part is to just start paying attention. What is the actual language that I'm using with myself about my body, and getting really clear on that. And then I love what you're proposing, this idea of taking those thoughts and saying, the next step, and this is what I would do if I was coaching around thoughts around alcohol, for example, is how's it making me feel? And how's it making me behave to have that thought? And we've already talked about some of the ways that it impacts women and how we feel and behave. We'll probably talk more about that as we go on, but I think you're going to really quickly realize it's not serving you. And so if it's not serving you, then what can you do about that? And I think there are kind of two approaches there. One is you can challenge the veracity of it. So you can actually start doing that work. Like, is this even true? What is true about this statement? What's all the evidence that this thing that I'm saying about myself is true, right? And what's the evidence that it's actually not true? And even if at the end of that, you come to the conclusion that still feels really true, is there something else about my body that's true that I could just choose to think instead? So something that feels equally true to me, but that actually serves me better. And I think that's kind of where you were going. I think the end goal is, eventually you want to prove these thoughts untrue, because I think that's for for a lot of us that's really key. But as maybe it's an interim step, maybe it's a final step, depending on who you are. But I think it's really, really helpful to go through that thought process of like, what else about this is true? So what you said about the body. So, my body, I have a body. I mean, it's obviously true. And thinking I have a body makes you feel a whole lot different than thinking my body is terrible. And so why would you not choose that second statement as the statement that you start practicing? Now, my guess is this is really hard to start doing. And even if women recognize there's something else that's true about their body, they're still going to find themselves back in that old neural pathway, that old thought loop of my body's terrible, right? So how do you actually get to a place where that becomes the default thought? The default thought becomes the new thought, the one that serves you better. Like, how do we get there? What's involved in that?
I mean, to me, it's just practice.
Yeah.
I mean, just like anything, it's like, I use the example sometimes with my clients of, it's like you have this certain route to the grocery store, and you're so used to taking that, it's like autopilot. You get in the car, you go, right. Versus like one day one of the roads is closed and you have to totally find a new route. And it's like, the route to the grocery store, and yet you have to pull out GPS, plug it in, be really mindful of every single turn and step that you take to get to the grocery store. And with time, that new route will become autopilot, but it's going to take time. Right. It's going to take intention, and it's going to take actually taking step by step by step
Right.
But one day that's just going to be the new autopilot. And so that's the same way that our brains work, is our brains are neuroplastic. They actually change based on the practice of new thinking. So I think the real question to ask, and this is something that I have asked my audience recently, is if it's really just a decision to decide to love your body, to decide to make peace with your body, why aren't you making that decision? Yeah. And for a lot of people, there's this belief that if I love and accept my body, then that's going to mean that I just give up on her and I don't care about her anymore. Mm-hmm. Or I don't care to lose weight anymore, or I don't care I'm just going to forget about her. Because that's kind of the message that we get, is that, it's almost like we get this message that unless you have that motivation to change from this place of I hate my body, and it sounds so crass and like so dramatic, yeah. But that's really what it is. It's like this messaging out there is almost hate yourself enough to make the change. And that just doesn't work. That's not how humans are motivated.
Yeah.
We are motivated to change from this place of love and acceptance.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And it just made me think about, the messaging in the wellness world that you and I are both in. And I mean, I think I told you this, and my audience base knows that I used to practice primarily around food. So I am a nutritional consultant, and I used to do all my coaching around food. And the messaging in the wellness world around what it takes and what is a valuable way to treat your body well, but also lose weight. They're always connected together. It's so rules-based, so extreme, so deprivation-based. It's really kind of like torture, right? So I totally hear you when you're saying that. I think that's all really, really helpful for women. And I love that idea, that analogy of the driving. I always use the cutting a path through the forest. It's the same idea. And the thing that I want to emphasize here, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on this, is that you're also going to go back sometimes to the old standard way to get to the grocery store. Like your brain's going to do that because it is the easiest pathway. It is the path of least resistance for your brain. So of course you're going to go back to that. And right now for you, that might be, that would involve you saying things to yourself that actually aren't very nice about your body. But if that's okay, that's okay. The really important piece in that is to notice that that's happening and to correct that.
Without judgment.
Yes, exactly. Right. Like just noticing without judgment is such a key piece in making change when it comes to your thoughts, no matter what the thoughts are that aren't serving you, is really staying in self-compassion, staying curious. Those are kind of the two tenets of my coaching approach. What is happening right now? And how can I change it? Is it serving me? And how can I change it? And this is not my fault, because this is the path I've always taken. So this is the path of least resistance for my brain. So I really love that analogy here. So the place to start changing it then is with the noticing and the articulating of the thoughts. And then it's about the practicing of the thoughts over and over. And then I don't know that we really talked about that, how this can play out for us. So why this is all worthwhile. Like, how does negative body image play out for women? How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think something that I'm really passionate about and have been talking about lately a lot is how it impacts. I mean, I said earlier that it impacts literally everything, but specifically something I don't think we realize on a daily basis is how much our body image impacts how we are with food even. Right. It's like our first response when we feel uncomfortable in our bodies, or we don't like our bodies, or we have those negative thoughts, is we turn to a diet a lot of times, right? Or we turn to trying to make some drastic change in how we are eating. Mm-hmm. And from that place, because the motivation is, I don't like my body, it doesn't lead to a sustainable approach, because we oftentimes want to take that quick change. And so we turn to a diet, and it's going to impact, how we eat. Or maybe even sometimes I see almost like the opposite effect. It's like I hate my body. So I'm just going to totally give up and throw in the towel. And that can lead to overeating and eating foods that don't really serve you in a way that doesn't really serve you. So this is kind of like one thing that I'm really passionate about, is helping make that connection of, okay, working on your body image is actually going to improve the way that you take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to feel better mentally, but you're also going to feel better physically, because the way I see, my own body image even is, me and my body, we're like on the same team. We are best friends. We are supporting each other, versus kind of the approach that so many women are in, or the relationship that so many women are in with their bodies, is we're fighting against each other. We are like battling. We are just at odds with each other, and we're constantly in that fighting relationship and trying to change from that place, which is just going to lead to resistance from you and your body.
Right.
That's one thing that I see a lot is, and why I personally, my approach is, let's do the work on your body image, your self-image, who you see yourself as. Because when you have a better relationship with yourself and your body, you are going to take actions from that place of, I care for my body, I respect my body, and you're going to see that in the way that you are, in the things that you're doing to improve your health, like physical things. So work on the relationship with your body, work on your relationship with food, and the result is being able to show up for yourself and do things, create healthy habits that are actually going to be consistent and going to lead to lasting changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the exercises that we do in one of the programs I coach in, that is an alcohol focused program, but we really do deal with it. It's a very holistic approach, is we ask participants to write a letter to their body, thanking their body for showing up. And we get them to get into as much detail as possible in terms of talking about all the various ways that their body is amazing and has been there for them over the course of their lives. And it's so amazing to watch people's awareness and to see the responses to that exercise. Like, it's a very, very powerful exercise. So I don't know how you feel about that exercise, but it's something that I would say, if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, oh gosh, this is me. And by the way, it probably is you, because we all do this. I mean, this is just such a universal thing, and it's not our fault. We're getting bombarded with messages that suggest that there's some kind of body type that's actually normal. I don't even like using the word normal. I think it's a terrible word. Some sort of typical, attainable body image out there that we should all, body, I don't mean image, but body type that we should be, that we should be trying to achieve for ourselves. And so it's not your fault, and you're not alone. And it is totally typical that you feel this way. But again, the first step in this is the awareness piece. And maybe you're thinking to yourself for the first time, oh, I think that's me. My thoughts are consumed. It's that whole exercise of like getting aware is probably the most stunning thing about all of it, is how much time you spend thinking about this. You're probably going to just be blown away at how often you actually have a thought about your body. I know that when I first started doing this work, that's what really surprised me. Like, the amount of time that was spent consumed by thinking about this as a problem and how I could fix it and what was wrong with me, and all of that was just shocking. So if you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I think this might be me, and I don't think this is a good thing, and you want to get started, this is a really great first exercise, other than the tracking your thoughts and writing things down and getting aware, like actually sitting down and writing. And I know it sounds really corny, but it's really powerful. Like, when I think, oh my gosh, this body has gotten me through so many things. I've had a baby. It's gotten me through many, many, many miscarriages. It has, and I've been able to recover from that mentally and emotionally and physically. I've recovered from all of that, like that trauma, physical trauma of going through that. It's taken me through years of studying in college and being able to birth a baby and go through puberty and through perimenopause and menopause, which is an incredible transition. And through so many illnesses and all the rest of it. And I've run a marathon and many half marathons. Like, it's amazing what my body has done for me. And all I do is crap on it. Right. So I think writing this letter might be a great place to start. What do you think about that? Do you have exercises that you recommend for clients?
I love that. And I'm a big fan of even just like brain dumping on specifically the topic of your body. Just get it all on paper, because sometimes, as we've been talking about, we have these thoughts that are just going around in our head and we don't even know that they exist until we start writing. And it's like, I've had people say, oh, I don't journal. But journaling is so powerful because we have so many thoughts in a day, and they are impacting our life, whether we recognize it or not.
Yeah.
Getting it out and just dumping it out, writing a letter to yourself. I also like writing a letter to, or writing a letter from the perspective of like me at 60 or 80 to myself right now. I'll have my clients do that sometimes, because we can get so much wisdom even from like our future self about what's important. And I guarantee that future you is not saying that you need to put this much focus and emphasis on your body.
Yeah, that's a really good one too. I love that. I love that exercise. Okay, let's switch topics, but only kind of. I have talked on this podcast before about the fact that I checked my scale out over 4 years ago when I stopped drinking, and I haven't stepped on a scale since. So it's been almost 4.5 years since I've stepped on a scale. It was the most freeing decision I made besides putting the work in to stop drinking. So, and like, I just continue to marvel at how really small a decision it was, but how big a decision it was in terms of how it's impacted me. What are your thoughts on the scale? Because I know a lot of women are just terrified to let go of a scale. And then, you go and you look, and the research says that people who weigh themselves regularly are more likely to maintain a healthy weight. Like, there's all this stuff out there that suggests that, it's dangerous or risky to let go of the scale. At least for me, I was grappling with that back and forth. And I just had this moment where I was like, overall, this effing thing is not serving me. It's just not serving me. And I wonder what it would, again, it was like really rooted in that curiosity, like what might happen if I just didn't do this anymore. And I'm assuming I know the answer to that. And I'm assuming the answer is I'm going to gain a bunch of weight. That's honestly, in my mind, I was like, I'm going to gain weight if I ditch this scale. And I was completely wrong. So I wonder what you think about that as somebody who practices in this area.
Yeah, I was definitely a weigh myself every day, even multiple times a day person. And I also let go of that a couple of years ago. And it was also the best decision of my life. And I am a big proponent for just totally ditching the scale, because it's just one of those things that is one of those outside influencers that is keeping you from being able to trust yourself. And when it comes to body image, it's just one more thing. Like, I found myself, and I've heard this from my clients also, it's like you step on the scale with this thought, I basically thinking, how am I going to feel about my day today based on what this number says? And I mean, I was like, I do not want to give so much power to some object to tell me whether I'm going to have a good day or not. Like, that was part of it for me. And I've heard this from my clients as well, is like just having that realization of how much weight we put on this one object to tell us how we're going to feel about ourselves.
Literally, we literally put our weight on this object.
Yes, literally put so much weight on this one object. And I just, it has zero benefit in my opinion, absolutely zero, because you shared even like your experience of having those thoughts of, if I let go of the scale, if I stop weighing myself, my weight's just going to climb and climb and climb and climb and going to be out of control. But actually what I have found time and time again is the opposite is true. When we let go of that external influence of the scale, we are better able to tune into our bodies and treat our bodies with more kindness. And that result is that our weight is actually going to find where it needs to be and actually stabilize not at one specific number, because this is a very misconstrued idea that our weight needs to be at one specific number, or like even fluctuate just like 1 or 2 pounds. No, absolutely not. Like our weight, our natural weight is meant to fluctuate over the course of a day, over the course of a couple days, over the course of, just a year even. It's like, it's meant to fluctuate within, I mean, I think the research says 10 to 15 pounds. And then we get into different stages of our life where it's meant to also change and be at different sizes and stages. But the reality is we don't have to rely on something like a scale to tell us how we need to feel and also dictate what we need to be doing. It's just actually making it harder and harder. It's one of the biggest changes I see when my clients let go of the scale, they're actually able to eat intuitively. My opinion is you really can't eat intuitively when you are weighing yourself every day. It's nearly impossible.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree.
Very fond of just ditching the scale.
Yeah. So if you're out there and you're thinking, God, that sounds so nice, but I don't think I can do it. Here's what I would suggest. And I'm curious to know what you would think about this, Victoria. I would suggest doing a 2-week experiment. Just don't weigh if you're someone who weighs yourself, or, if you only weigh yourself once a week, then do a 1-month experiment where you don't weigh yourself for a month. And the experiment is not really around weight gain, weight loss. The experiment is around how it makes you feel. And I would go back. I wanted to say something. You were talking about the journaling piece. I want to say to all of you out there listening to this podcast, who hate the word journaling and hate the idea of journaling, just think of it as recording or list making, if that makes you feel better. For me, it does. I've never really been a natural journaler. And so whenever I characterize it as making a list or recording important data, that feels more like feasible and viable for my brain. So whatever makes it work for you, what you want to do is you want to write down how this thing is making you feel. So how not having it in your life is making you feel, because again, you're probably making a lot of assumptions around this. You're probably thinking, oh my God, I'm going to feel totally out of control. This actually really grounds me and it helps me. And it, whatever I need this thing, that's how I felt. I was very dependent on it, but letting go of it. What I've learned is that it was actually the complete opposite. I didn't need it at all. And it was like you said, I mean, there are only 2 ways that scale goes when you step on it. It either gives you what you want to see or it gives you what you don't want to see. So you are, by stepping on that scale, you are setting yourself up for how the rest of the day goes. And that's what was happening to me. So there's a 50% chance every day that I was going to get the message that this was not a good day or I was not a good person before I even started, off on my day. So 2 things there. Do the experiment. How do you feel about an experiment for someone who's feeling?
I love using that word, experiment. Yeah. I love it, because it feels like if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to get rid of the scale forever. Like that feels very extreme. And a lot of my clients go to those extremes. Like I'm either gonna weigh myself every day or I can never get on the scale. But like part of that too is practicing that little bit in the middle of the all or nothing. And just like, I love that idea of just getting rid of it for a couple days, or, having your partner hide it for a couple weeks and experimenting with, I love that you specified too. It's not the weight gain or weight loss or anything to do with that. It's to experiment with how you feel. And something you also mentioned that I want to touch on is that this idea that you were talking about, how when we get on the scale every day, we feel in control and we're afraid. We have all this thought, like, if I don't have it, I'm going to feel out of control. One of the biggest, craziest things that I see all the time is this concept of when we actually let go of control, we actually feel more in control. Do you feel like you experience that? It's like,
oh, absolutely.
When you let go of control, you actually you feel more in control because you are the one who's in the driver's seat versus the scale, the food, your body image, that type, all of that.
Absolutely. And I would say this, my scale's still there. So there's still a scale in my bathroom. I just have chosen to not step on it. And I think that, I would almost say maybe don't hide it, because the empowerment comes in the positive decision to not step on it. It comes in this is how I actually am in control. I'm making the decisions here instead of this thing making the decisions. And so, I mean, I don't look at it anymore, and it's covered in dust and it's underneath a counter somewhere. Probably doesn't even work anymore, but it's there. And part of the reason why it's still there too, is that I really hate the idea of committing to forever on any change you're trying to make, because I feel like you're setting yourself up for overwhelm and failure with that. So even around alcohol, I always say, like, I choose not to drink today because it doesn't serve me. And I just make that decision every day. And I could drink if I want to, but I don't know why I would want to right now, because it doesn't serve me. But I am not saying forever about that. And I think even about the scale, I'm not saying forever, and I'll be honest, I revisit it sometimes. Like a couple months ago, I was like, oh, maybe I should step on the scale. I don't know. It feels like I've gained a few pounds. And maybe if I don't get on this, if I don't get on the scale, this is going to turn into too much. And all of that chatter started up in my brain again. And I really thought it through. And I was like, what are all the benefits that you've gained over the last 4 years of not stepping on that scale? And do you want to go back into that? Because I feel like it's almost like alcohol. If I had a glass of wine right now, all of that mental chatter would start again. Just like if I stepped on the scale, it would all start again. And it would be hard for me not to step on the scale the next day to see if that number had changed. So the freedom that I have from taking that out and from making that positive decision, I do not make that decision daily anymore. I never even think about weighing myself, except for these random things. Like a couple months ago, whenever I was feeling like I'd eaten, I guess, probably too many brownies or something. I don't think about it very often, and it is really freeing for me, but I love the idea of maintaining control and making a positive choice on that. Instead of saying I'm throwing the scale out for forever. How do you feel about that? What I just said?
I actually love that. And something that you said that I think is really interesting is that you mentioned I still have that occasional thought come up, like, should I get on the scale? But you didn't make it mean anything is wrong. You didn't make it mean that anything's gone wrong. You just revisited that as just, let's make the best decision for me today. And what is that decision?
Yeah.
Not that there's a right or wrong.
Yeah. I want to be really clear about this. I also sometimes think maybe I should just do some kind of program or plan. So that thought still randomly comes in my head. Of course it does. It was the main default pathway for me for like the first 40 some years of my life, right? This whole, like, if you feel like your eating is out of control, has gotten out of control, or you've gained weight, then go do a diet, right? So even with my background around food, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I got certified in food, is because I was trying to explore a less rigid approach to food and health, and a more, there were lots of reasons, but that was a big piece of it, is that I was craving freedom myself from it. And it's been a process over the last 15 years or whatever it's been since I did that certification. Like, it's definitely been a process for me of like slowly taking back what I see now as actual control and power over it, and letting go of a lot of these rules and these ideas that I had around what I actually needed when it came to how I ate and food and all of it. So I still have these rogue random thoughts, and like, I'll find myself Googling like lose 10 pounds in 30 days or whatever. And then I'm like, what are you doing? And so this is the difference, is that I am staying in self-compassion around it, which is so key, because if I wasn't doing that, that would lead, first of all, I'd have no self-compassion about the fact that my body is changing, which has been happening for me during perimenopause and menopause. It happens to every woman. And I'm really doing my best to just accept this is actually a positive thing. Little side note, when Jen Sleep-Huber, who I was talking about earlier, was on my podcast once, we were talking about, this, like how your weight shifts sometimes in perimenopause and menopause. So sometimes it's not about weight gain, although it can be that. Sometimes it's just about like stuff is sitting differently on your body. So I've been very lucky, I guess, probably genetic thing, never really had much of a belly. But when I went in through perimenopause and into full menopause, I did develop this belly, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And I was calling it jokingly my menopot. And Jen said, and she said, yeah, we often talk about that as a spare tire, but what I like to refer to it as is a life preserver, because the truth is what's happening with your fat cells during menopause is that they're trying to grow a little bit, because it's the one place where you can still make estrogen. And so they're trying to help you balance that out. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love that so much. I can think about this as like a life preserver. And it's another example of like loving your body and actually respecting and appreciating the things that your body does to try to keep you feeling good. And this little pot that's probably going to be there forever is there to help with that, which I think is really cool. So I just went completely off topic, but I wanted to share that little story because don't you just love that analogy, that way of talking about it?
I've heard that also. And it just goes back to what I believe is we can trust our bodies. Our bodies aren't out to get us.
Yeah.
They are always working for us and for our health. That is a thought that I love to think, I love to choose, and it's made the biggest difference in my own body image. And I know that it will continue to make a difference in my body image as my body continues to change.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the self-compassion piece really helps with that, but it also helps in those moments when, even as someone who's been working on this for a long time, when I have those rogue thoughts, and that's how I think of them. I'm like, oh, there's a rogue thought, and I notice it, right? Okay, why is this happening? What's going on? Why are you feeling this way? Oh, it feels like, these things have happened lately, and those are making you feel like you're out of control. And it usually has nothing to do with food, frankly, or how I'm eating. It's like other stuff in my life. And this is you trying to take back some semblance of control. What's the evidence this is going to work? There's none. So when I go, because I look at my history, I'm like, and I know so much, everything I know about dieting and dieting culture and how it's 95% of the time it fails by 2 years. Like there's no data to suggest that dieting actually works or is beneficial. So I can't unring that bell. I have all that knowledge now. It's just like all the knowledge I have around drinking and alcohol, right? I can't unring the bell. It's all there. And so that knowledge comes back to me when I'm trying to work through the whole, like, what's the evidence that this is actually a good idea? What's the evidence this is not a good idea? And I work through all of that. And I've always come to the same conclusion. It's probably happened, I'd say, like 5 times since I stopped weighing myself. I've had this thought of like, maybe I should just weigh myself or maybe I should like weigh myself and then go on some kind of plan. Cause they always go together. Right. So the assumption is like, I'm going to weigh myself. My weight's going to be higher than it was the last time I weighed myself 4.5 years ago. Surprise, surprise. I've gone through menopause. It probably will be higher, but it's going to be higher. And then I'm going to put some kind of plan in place to address that and to lose weight. And I try really hard to stay in curiosity and self-compassion around it and really work it through. Like, in the big picture, is this actually going to serve me? And so far, again, I never say never, but so far I've always made the decision to not weigh myself and to not download the app or to not try the program or whatever, which feels really, really good. It really does feel like, now that as I'm kind of summarizing this, it really does feel like I'm in control.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably intuitive eating. Like, I don't know. I've never read a book. Like, I'm not an intuitive eating coach. I've never studied it. I don't even think I've ever read a full book on intuitive eating, but I have talked to lots of people about intuitive eating, and it feels intuitive to me the way that I eat now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because when you are more focused, like when you let go of the scale, you let go of the diet apps, the tracking apps, you're actually able to pay attention to the most important thing, which is how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And asking questions like, how do I feel in my body? Do I feel good? Do I not feel good? If I don't feel good, what could be leading to that? And you get to be curious and look for the wisdom inside of you versus just immediately jumping to a plan, which no plan out there, no diet book, no like new news article has as much wisdom as your body does. Like, your body is the best manual for how to be and feel healthy for you.
I love that. Okay. I have one last question, because somehow we filled up almost an hour and I'm not even sure how. I feel like I was talking for a lot of it, but I love having someone to talk this through with, because this is not something I talk about very often. I just don't. So if the most common question that I get or comment that I get about intuitive eating when I'm talking to either my friends or to clients about this topic is,
I can't possibly do that. That's going to lead to weight gain, right? That fear that we were talking about around like letting go of control and what the consequences might be. What would you say to someone who's feeling that way about it?
Yeah. Well, to me, we talked a little bit about what intuitive eating is.
Mhm.
And just like another way to talk about it is really just, it's a framework to help you heal your relationship with food. And as we've been talking about with body image, how it's just the thoughts you have about your body, how you show up, and it's not actually about your body, how you show up with food and your food issues it's really all about the thoughts you have around food, the relationship you have with food that's leading to the overeating, the eating foods that don't actually feel good in your body. And so when you do that work to heal your relationship with food, you're going to feel more in control. You're going to feel more calm around food. You're going to actually be able to make those empowered decisions based on how you feel.
Mhm.
And that's going to lead you to actual, like real better health versus staying stuck on this exhausting all or nothing diet cycle where, so often the trend is you're either, you go to these such extremes of I'm either dieting and exercising to the extreme and then falling back and doing the exact opposite.
Right.
So that cycle is what we know actually leads to poorer health as a result, because you're oftentimes you hear like losing the same 10 to 15 pounds over and over and over again.
Yeah. Except you're not, are you? Like, I think scientifically what the research shows is that you're actually not losing the same 10 or 15 pounds. I always say nobody yo-yos down, everyone yo-yos up.
Exactly.
So it's a new 5 pounds that you're losing. And we just know so clearly that it's not working.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You see the evidence. And yet I think subconsciously, like everyone wants that Amazon Prime, like 2-day shipping. We want that quick result.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think if you can just go back to just looking back on your life and see how there's evidence that it hasn't worked, that it doesn't work. And I think the biggest thing is realizing that even the newest research out there, like the newest diet out there is going to be the same unless you do that work to heal your relationship with food. That is the utmost, most important thing.
Yeah.
And because it works with your body versus like being on a diet is always going to lead to that fight against your body. Yeah. It's going to work for the long run because you're actually listening to your body's cues.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's just a really great time to ask yourself, how do I want to feel? So what do I want when it comes to my relationship with food? How do I want to feel about food and eating and weight and all of these issues? And is what I'm doing now or have been doing historically getting me there? And the answer's going to be no. I feel pretty confident of it if you've been in the diet cycle your whole life. If the answer is yes, then you wouldn't still be in the diet cycle, right? You would have achieved that. And so how is it I want to feel about this? And less about like a behavioral based goal, like how is it I want to behave? So what do I want to do? Because this is where we get into like weight loss goals and really specific rules around eating and food and all of that. How do I want to feel? And for me, the answer to that question is I want this thing to be pretty small and irrelevant. I do not want it to be running the show. I don't want to be thinking about it all the time. If I am thinking about it, I'd like to be thinking about it in a positive way, but I don't want it to be consuming my thoughts in the way that it has during periods of my life consumed my thoughts and really been driving the bus. And so is that possible? If you want something like that for yourself, is that possible in a deprivation-based, rule-based system of eating where you talk to yourself about your body in the way that you're talking to yourself about your body? Or is that what needs to change, right? Is it time to try something different instead of just trying harder at the same old thing you've been trying for forever? So this is why I wanted to have you on, Victoria, is because I wanted to bring up this idea of intuitive eating again as a way to try different. Again, it's an experiment.
You don't have to commit to it for the rest of your life. Just try it. God knows you've probably tried every single diet approach out there. So why not try this non-diet approach?
Yeah. And kind of like the same way that we were talking about body image, how you are literally learning to think differently about your body. The way I see intuitive eating is kind of the same. Like you're learning to think differently about food.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this natural, like, I always like to say intuitive eating does not feel intuitive at first because it's so counterculture. It's so different from how you've approached food in the past. And so it's going to feel like resistance. It's going to feel difficult, which is why I'm a big proponent for working with a coach or, some kind of support, because you're going to go through what feels like the river of misery before you get to the other side.
Right. Yeah. Always the case.
It's
always the case. Yeah. So if people want to find out more about you, Victoria, where can they do that?
Yeah. So you can visit me at my website, which is victoria-yates.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm very active over on Instagram at @nondiet_RN. And I also have a podcast called the Redefining Health Podcast, where I share more about all of this related to your relationship with food, relationship with your body. So you can come listen over there. And if anyone is listening and wants to learn more about working together, I also have a free consult that anyone can book.
So go to Victoria's website if you want some more info, and you can connect with her there. Well, thank you so much, Victoria. It's been such a interesting conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to me.
Yes. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you for having me on.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a burnout and balance coach, I help busy high achievers like you create a more balanced, joyful life. Ready to create a life you don't want to escape from? Download your free Blueprint for Change now. This incredible workbook includes some of my favorite coaching tools and will help you get clear on what you need more and less of in your life. Grab it at www.wendymccallum.com/blueprint. That's www.wendymccallum.com/blueprint.